have, and then we'll just pull the mayor in when he's available?
Yeah, I do think that is the best approach, Molly.
Great. So we should have at least 15 minutes of content or so before his speaking part. So that might be a nice way to make sure that we're using everybody's time effectively. Do you want to go ahead and fire up the presentation, please, Parker?
Are you seeing it?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay.
Great. Let me just make sure that my office here isn't going to get busted in by any pets or kids. Okay, welcome. Thank you all so much for coming. We're here to celebrate another successful year of Energize St. Paul's Race to Reduce. Next slide. Our agenda for today is we'll introduce the team. I'll talk to you a little bit about our benchmarking program. We were able to grab some video from some of the buildings that are participating in our energy management program. So we have some efficiency stories to share with you. And then we're expecting the mayor in a little bit. So we'll go through, we might end up moving him to later in the program, but we're expecting the mayor for a few minutes of comments. And then we'll go through a couple of sort of exemplary buildings that are that qualified for some individual recognition based on the activities of the past year. Next slide. Great. So this is kind of the core team who works on the benchmarking program. As I said, I'm Molly Janice Smith. I'm on the far left there. Russ Stark is our Chief Resilience Officer. He works in the mayor's office. Kurt Schultz is in Planning and Economic Development. He does a lot of the city's sustainable building policy work. And Parker Lindbergh is a Green Corps member in the mayor's office. So this is the team for this year. You also maybe have interacted with some of our wonderful benchmarking help desk staff. I don't actually have a picture of them. It occurred to me when I was putting this together, so we'll go for that next year. But these folks plus our benchmarking help desk constitute the core team that provides the program for everybody. Next slide. Great. Most of you are familiar with benchmarking. That is why you're on the phone today. We'll talk a little bit about the benchmarking policy that St. Paul passed earlier this year in a few moments, but first just wanted to ground us all in what benchmarking is and why we do it. Peter Drucker famously stated, or at least it's attributed to him, that you can't manage what you don't measure. So benchmarking is really applying the same concept to building energy and water performance. We benchmark in order to make sure that our buildings are using energy and water as anticipated, both over time and relative to peers. So if you have a big change of your own building from one year to the next, or if your building's doing better or worse than your peers, benchmarking is a great way to find that out. So what benchmarking is the combination of energy and water use and building information. With that, we get valuable metrics such as the energy use intensity, which is measured in kBTU per square feet per year. So that's just energy divided by square feet. We also get another useful metric called the Energy Star score. And if you're not already, could you go ahead and mute yourselves? Thanks. Next slide. So the purpose of benchmarking is to measure building energy and water performance. And the purpose of that benchmarking is to manage our buildings better. So, you know, this concept is also employed in other industries, like, for example, the nutrition label on a food package, or that yellow sticker that comes with your, you know, hot water and home heating system and your refrigerator. You know, that's a benchmark as well. How does this device compare to other similar devices in terms of, well, cost and performance? Sorry, not sure if that was on my end or not. Similarly, we wouldn't buy a car without knowing how many miles per gallon it gets, and how long we'd be able to drive on a tank of gas. So it's the same principle. You know, the benchmarking process provides us with metrics that are similar to these that we see in other industries. Next slide. And again, if you've just joined, if you could mute yourself, that would be great. So, as I mentioned, we passed a benchmarking policy earlier this year in January of 2020. It seems like a really long time ago, but in fact, we're still relatively new to the benchmarking game here in St. Paul. Many of you know that we had a voluntary program prior to this for the years of 2018 and 2019. So this is actually our third annual Energize St. Paul recognition event. So our benchmarking policy requires properties, multifamily and commercial, 50,000 square feet and larger, to benchmark their energy and water usage annually by June 1st. This year, we had our largest properties do so, 100,000 square foot plus properties in both commercial and multifamily spaces, benchmarked with a deadline of June 1st, 2020. As you know, it would be hard to miss that this has been an extraordinary year in a lot of different ways, between the pandemic and the social unrest that we've seen in our city. You know, we had some struggles, not only did we have struggles just in terms of getting in touch with people and encouraging them to benchmark, but also, you know, our building sector, between, you know, damage due to riots, you know, low occupancy for many of you who lease or rent your spaces. I mean, this is just a heck of a year. So I'm really glad that we were able to make it this far and to get energy data from so many of you. So the fun continues. This is an ongoing process, and benchmarking is really only valuable if you do it annually. So for all of you who have properties 50,000 square feet and larger in the commercial or residential spaces, you will also be required to do this next year in 2021 and on an ongoing basis. Next slide. Again, those of you who are in the thick of it and benchmarked your buildings know this, but for everybody's knowledge, we actually developed two different ways to comply with the ordinance. Our preferred pathway, and the pathway that I think many of you who are here took, is to select full disclosure. So that means that not only do you benchmark entering your building energy and water data into Energy Star Portfolio Manager, but also you chose to share your energy and water data with the city, and we're incredibly grateful for that. Based on feedback, both internal and external to the city, we also created a partial disclosure pathway. And this is basically the bare minimum required to comply. You benchmark your property as normal, entering in your building information as well as your energy and water data. But when you submit, it looks very similar, but in fact, the city doesn't receive your energy and water data in the partial disclosure process. So as I said, this is something that we offered because some people wanted it. Next slide, please. And I'm really glad to say that the vast majority of you selected full disclosure. Go ahead and click. In fact, a whopping 81% of you chose full disclosure, which is great, and I think is a wonderful metric to demonstrate the success of the program. When you choose full disclosure, not only are you complying with the ordinance, but you're also receiving recognition, and that's today, in case anybody was confused about why we're here. As well as you get some, personalized support that is individual to your building. Since we had to delay closing the data set a little bit, these pieces haven't come out quite yet, but I'm proud to say that we are very close to sending you your scorecards, as well as some of the other goodies that I'll continue to describe here. In addition, some of the folks that will mention a little bit later in the presentation actually did get engineering support worth around $5,000 because they chose full disclosure, and because their property wasn't performing so well, and they decided that it was time to do something about it, and we were there to help them with that through some grant funding that we received in partnership with Center for Energy and Environment. Next slide. So why should I join the Race to Reduce? Well, this was from 2 years ago. Unfortunately, we can't entice you with beer and snacks this year, so that's off the table. When we did this a couple of years ago, we did it in the Pioneer Endicott building. There was a brewery located in the basement, and then we got to take photos in their amazing historic atrium. So, we'll get back there at some point. But, being recognized can be a great motivator for some folks, and perhaps that's why some of you on the phone are here today. Next slide. Another benefit is that your building appears on the Minnesota benchmarking map. And for the buildings that are in compliance this year, they won't be red dots. Those are all of the ones that didn't choose to comply or just didn't hear about it because this year has been very challenging. But your building will appear, and we'll let you guys know when this is all squared away. Your building will appear on a map. It's actually a map of the whole state, but I zoomed in on the Twin Cities here because that's where most of the dots are. So each dot represents a building, and if you're proud of your performance or it's something that you want to highlight, you could always send, prospective tenants or buyers of your property to this and say, hey, look at this. I'm doing great in terms of energy performance in comparison to my peers. Next slide. And another benefit of joining the Race to Reduce, and that again is meaning that you chose full disclosure, is you get a building report card. This is kind of the front page of the building report card, shows you some specific information that compares your property to other similar properties. And if you, like I, are wondering why only one of the photos at the top of the building report card is of St. Paul, the reason is because we are participating in a partnership called the Efficient Buildings Collaborative. The other two cities that are also benefiting from this collaboration are Edina and St. Louis Park. And I'm also glad to say that both Minneapolis and the cities of Minneapolis and Rochester, Minnesota will be submitting, even though they're not participating in all of the pieces of the collaborative, they're also going to be on the map. So we're going for statewide dominance, and I'm really glad to see so many of Minnesota's large and prominent cities choosing to benchmark and also choosing to submit their data to the benchmarking map. Next. And last but not least, this will also come out with your energy scorecards. We'll be giving you a flyer on our energy concierge service. Our energy concierge service is basically, it's a fancy name for a pretty simple concept, which is the hardest part about implementing energy efficiency can be for a lot of really busy building owners and managers, just figuring out what to do, where to find a loan for it, what are the utility incentives, What should I start with? Who do I call? Well, the City of St. Paul, through our concierge service, is interested in possibly being your first phone call when you kind of receive your building scorecard and you're wondering what you can do to improve. We can talk through some options with you, get started on the right path, make connections with our partners at Xcel Energy in order to get you going. So as I said, you'll be receiving some of this information when you receive your building scorecards. And of course, for that matter, we'll just make sure to include this as we follow up with all of you after this meeting so that you have a little flyer. Our energy concierge service, we haven't fully integrated into St. Paul's new website, but that's a goal for 21. Next slide. Okay, great. This is part one of our attempt to break up the who's speaking here. So I'll just go ahead and give a little bit of background, and then Parker, maybe you want to paste the YouTube link into the chat. So our efficiency stories come to us from two of the property management companies that have participated in our energy concierge program. One is the first one that you'll see is the Community Action Partnership of Ramsey and Washington counties. And the second person that you'll see interviewed is from Halverson Blazer Group. And we'll have those partners will be recognized for their participation a little bit later in the program, but we wanted to offer a little bit of a platform to them so that they could talk a little bit about what they're working on in terms of energy efficiency. So if you'll take 4 or 5 minutes, go watch that YouTube video and come back and join us. We'd appreciate it. Make sure to mute yourselves while you're doing that. We'll go ahead and reconvene at 3:57. So once again, if you're just joining us or you're wondering why it's silent all of a sudden, there is a link to a YouTube video in the chat. That's a video that we made for this event. A couple of comments from a few of our participating buildings in our concierge service. Go ahead and click on that, watch it for a few minutes, and then come on back. We'll see you at about 3:57, about 4 minutes. Okay, everyone, welcome back. Parker, I think we'll hold off and give the mayor a few moments, and we'll go on to the individual recognitions. So Russ, that'll be your cue. So you can do the individual recognitions, and then once we see the mayor hop on, then you can just finish up with this last bit here and then flip into introduce mode. That works.
That sounds good.
Great. So I'll just tee you up here for a moment, Russ. Parker, if you want to go back one slide. Great. Thank you all. And of course, you know, it goes without saying that we, the Energized St. Paul team, as I'm sure all of you are all still very much learning how to work with our technology and be able to do a lot of the things that we were able to do prior to the pandemic. So appreciate your patience. We tried to embed the video, and we found that YouTube was actually going to be a much better way for you to see it. So hopefully that was helpful. So as I mentioned, I wanted to just kind of introduce this recognition piece a little bit. As I mentioned, the two folks that you just heard from in the video are from two of our participating management companies. And so we have a couple of different opportunities for recognition in the program right now. One is, you know, if your building is a superstar performer and you get a Energy Star score of 95 or greater, which is, it's on a scale of 100, so that's a very high score. That's one way that that we're recognizing buildings and their staff today, as well as for folks who have kind of piloted some of these energy concierge services that I mentioned. We're also going to be giving them a little bit of a spotlight today. So what Russ is about to show you is just kind of our way of saying thank you to all of you, and also particularly to some of our high performers and some of our buildings that have really stepped up, and you know, their staff has reached out and has chosen to work with us on efficiency programs. So with that, I will hand it off to our Chief Resilience Officer, Russ Stark, to let us know who we're recognizing.
All right, thanks, Molly. Well, good to be with you all this afternoon. It is a little bit different circumstances than our last two annual recognition events. You know, 2020 has been different on so many fronts. As Molly mentioned, it would have been a little bit more fun to be in a brewery together, celebrating our accomplishments. And in the past, we've also done certificates, and we figured on a virtual event that wouldn't have quite the same effect. But it's an exciting year in that this is the first year that we actually have data, as you all have started to benchmark and then disclose that data with us. So we are really pleased to be able to recognize those of you who are already high performers, and certainly also folks over time who continue to make progress and improve, because that's what this effort is all about. It fits into the context of our larger work as a city on climate action and sustainability. It's an important component of our climate action resilience plan that was passed by the City Council just about a year ago now. And so we're kind of in the first year of implementation of that plan moving forward, which has us aiming to reduce greenhouse gas emissions community-wide down to net zero by 2050 and 50% by 2030, consistent with the UN International Panel on Climate Change's analysis of what we need to do to have a chance to keep global warming at 1.5 degrees Celsius or less. So you all are contributing to those efforts, and I just want to start off by saying thank you. We can move on to the next slide. So this is the first this is the first I've actually seen these results as well. So as Molly mentioned, the Energy Star score of 95 or above, this is like the top 5% of performing buildings in this category. So really impressive. So this is in the multifamily category. And as you all see here, we've actually got two different property owners with 5 properties achieving this standard, which is pretty remarkable, in Stewart Companies and Stephen Scott. Super impressive. Congratulations, and thanks for all the clearly hard work and thought that's gone into these properties over a long period of time to be able to achieve that. And then, as you can see on the screen, Synergy Conservice, Excelsior Management with 2 properties, Peak Campus, and then Mid-Continent Management, all with a property each in this category of Energy Star scores of 95 and above. So 15 properties total in the multifamily category across the city. Congratulations. Thank you. Virtual fireworks are going off behind me. I know you can't see them. And I'm virtually clinking glasses with you over this accomplishment. All right, and we know, just a quick note here on the multifamily piece. One of the things that you all are probably aware of is a lot of new construction going on in multifamily around St. Paul. And one of the things that we're proud of is the program that Molly mentioned that Kurt Schultz runs, which is our sustainable building program, where all projects that come through the city of St. Paul that are receiving public funds of $200,000 or more are asked to meet a higher standard of green design and energy efficiency. And so with the construction now underway down at Highland Bridge, formerly the Ford site, we're going to have our first buildings in St. Paul coming in, meeting the new 2020 standards for SB 2030 and B3 of 80% more, less carbon intensive than the buildings built under the 2005 standard. So kind of an exciting milestone for the city there as well. All right, let's move on to the next group. So same top tier of top 5% in building performance, this in the commercial sector. And we've got 3 buildings that met this high bar across the city. Travelers South, part of Travelers St. Paul in downtown, of course. Energy Technology Center, operated by Wellington Management out on Energy Park Drive. I was just walking over there a couple weeks ago in my neighborhood. And the Golden Rule Building, also downtown, operated by Commercial Real Estate Services. Congratulations. I know these buildings have been high performing buildings for many years again, because this stuff does not happen overnight. It takes time, it takes attention to detail to do this really well, but glad that we could recognize your efforts. And I know that we're continuing to partner with a lot of these same folks on some next steps on some of these buildings and other buildings owned by the same owners. More virtual fireworks. All right, is there another? All right, so this is recognition for those who have participated in the Energy Concierge service that Molly mentioned to date. Where we're doing some additional work with our partners at the Center for Energy and the Environment to do some energy auditing of these buildings. And that's with the Halverson Blazer Group, Wellington Management, Community Action Partners, again, of Ramsey and Washington counties over at the Bigelow Building, which I can almost see out my window if I squint, and Palu Enterprises. And so thank you for working with us on this next set of steps here. It's exciting. We saw in the video from Halverson Blazer and Community Action kind of what their plans are moving forward, and we know that Wellington continues to do a lot in this space across their portfolio of buildings. Palu, I am less familiar with, so I look forward to getting to know you folks better and hearing about what you are up to and what that opportunity looks like. Hey, look, actual virtual fireworks, nice. And that is our not quite the same as in past years, 2020 set of recognitions. I just again want to say thank you. We literally have no chance of meeting the city's goals around climate and energy without cooperation, participation, collaboration across sectors, private sector, public sector, all building owners and managers. This is going to be a big group effort for all of us to get better and reduce greenhouse gas emissions and save money and energy over time. So thank you. And the mayor, I believe, has joined us.
I have.
Awesome. All right. Well, now I have the pleasure then, Mr. Mayor, of introducing him. Mayor Carter in some ways needs no introduction from me in this group, but just a few words of background about the mayor in terms of this specific work. It was about 2.5 years ago in 2018 that we officially had the kickoff event for Energize St. Paul over in the lobby of the Securian's headquarters building in downtown, where we kicked off the voluntary benchmarking program and had a lot of participants joining us there. 2.5 years flies by these days. It feels like 2.5 millennia ago or something. But also in the last couple of years, the mayor has gotten super involved in climate work here in St. Paul, of course, but also working with others across the country. He's on the National Climate Mayors Steering Committee. And soon after that event in 2018, we applied and were selected to be one of 25 cities around the country working with Bloomberg Philanthropies on what's called the American Cities Climate Challenge, where we've been lucky to get a lot of assistance on a lot of these efforts at reducing greenhouse gas emissions across the city. And the mayor has supported and led all of these efforts for us to really step into this space in a much bigger way than the city has before. We are a signatory to what's called We're Still In, which was an effort to make sure that the rest of the world knew after the Trump administration pulled the country officially out of the Paris Climate Accord, that cities across the country are still in. We are still planning to meet those commitments and have been doing the work necessary to do so. Without further ado, my pleasure to introduce Mayor Melvin Carter.
Let's see. Thank you, Russ. I really appreciate that. And thank you. I see that some of you clapping and I appreciate that too. And by way of by way of beginning with the apology, my wife is a midwife. So I stay home with kids and do social distance learning and things like that and hang out with our 9-month-old while she goes and saves the world. So if you hear, I always tell our team, if you hear a dog bark, a baby cry, and a doorbell ring all in one call, just shout bingo and we just keep on moving forward. Look, I appreciate you guys joining us for this very unusual year of celebrating our Energize St. Paul's Race to Reduce program. You know, we're working together to help reduce our energy consumption in buildings, which is one of the significant parts, as we all know, of emissions in a major city like we are. We regret not being able to be in person, but we're really thankful for the wide reach at the same time that holding a virtual event offers. To all of our partners, Xcel Energy, District Energy, Center for Energy and Environment, BOMA, Greater St. Paul BOMA, the U.S. Green Buildings Council, and certainly our St. Paul Building and Construction Trades Council. We appreciate your partnership and your engagement. I tell people all the time that one of the biggest frustrations for any mayor in America That's a long song. I tell people all the time that one of the biggest frustrations for any mayor in America is the number of things that you want different, but that even as mayor, you can't just sort of wave a magic wand and make suddenly be completely different. And that requires good partnerships. That requires being able to engage other folks, being able to bring different folks together in a vision. And honestly, it also requires being able to follow. And so I appreciate those major partners. I appreciate all of you for being the leaders that I get to follow in this work. One of the central leaders that I get to follow in this work being Russ Stark, who he and I came on the city council together back in 2007, 2008. We've been really good friends, and I've been learning a whole lot from him ever since on these topics and just about some of everything else. And so I appreciate your partnership as well, Russ. Look, we're here today to recognize that big partnership, right? We're to celebrate our building owners, our building managers, the engineers, all the rest of you who work to make energy management a priority. You all have demonstrated your commitment to reducing your carbon footprint and helping the city reach our emission reduction goals by meeting and setting your bold goals for your organizations and for your buildings. We know that COVID has created unique challenges, really unique challenges for building owners, for managers. We really appreciate, she is yelling at me. We really appreciate that in spite of those challenges, you're committed to saving energy and helping the city meet our goals, helping your building meet your goals for greenhouse gas reductions and making those types of investments that are so critical to helping us meet all those goals. You know, we used to talk about, I remember when I was in high school, we talked about climate change as though it was like the boogeyman under the bed, that if we didn't take action, it was going to come and get us. You know, climate change is no longer under the bed. It's no longer in the dark. It's no longer invisible. It's right here in front of our faces. We see clear effects from it in our city. We don't always think of ourselves. I go speak nationally in different spaces and in Washington, D.C. on climate crisis. And people kind of look at me like, you're from St. Paul, Minnesota. You're from the Midwest, the heartland. You know, you're not from one of the coasts. Why are you talking about climate crisis? And I like to share with them and to us sometimes, because we know that we have seen, you know, worse flooding than ever before on our Mississippi River. We know that we see our streets beat up in ways that we aren't used to. We know that we saw in my first year as mayor a landslide event or a slope failure that dropped 400,000 pounds of rock right on the Wabash Avenue. We don't always connect those things with climate crisis, but these are climate-related events that are disproportionately impacting our under-resourced residents, neighborhoods, and businesses. So through our climate action and resilience plan here, the city of St. Paul, we aim to make our city carbon neutral by 2050 to address all of these kind of impacts. Benchmarking, the work that we're doing, is an important step to achieve that goal. Right now, energy use in buildings accounts for about 60% of our city's greenhouse gas emissions. It's also estimated that up to 30% of energy in an average commercial building is wasted. So as I think about that as the city, for the city-owned buildings, that also translates to about 30% of our energy costs are wasted. So becoming carbon neutral in just a few decades will have a substantial future, not just on our emissions, but on our local economy as well, very directly. So 2020 is the first year that buildings 100,000 square feet and larger have been required to benchmark their energy and water use. Hold on one second. Miles, would you pick her up, please? Grab her for a second. Sorry, I just, yay. 2020 is the first year that buildings 100,000 square feet and larger have been required to benchmark. Implementing those benchmarking policy is a key next step in advancing our energy goals as a city. And we understand and appreciate that it takes time, resource, and investment to complete that work. We this year, you know, one of the mantras for me is, if I'm going to ask you to do something, the organization I lead is going to do it as well. So in 2020, I want to share with you the city of St. Paul. We converted all of our light fixtures to LED in nearly all of our fire stations and libraries, and completed thorough energy audits of all of our larger buildings. We're exploring possible use of a geothermal system at the Como Zoo and Conservatory, which will impact our community for a generation. In 2020, we built out nearly 20 miles of bikeways in St. Paul, along with our partners at Ramsey County, to create new ways to connect people to work, school, to visit a relative, or go grocery shopping. In 2021, we'll launch the country's first 100% renewable energy powered electric vehicle car share program. I'm told we're already ordering those vehicles. And we're partnering with the Building Trades Council to create new pathways to opportunity in the trades for St. Paul residents, with a particular focus on people of color and women. There's clearly a lot more work to be done, but I'm really proud to be a city that has been recognized as doing our part, doing an enormous job or taking enormous efforts to prioritize our climate and to prioritize our future. When we receive those accolades as a city, I'm always careful to let them know that I'm accepting them, of course. I often think, like, we Minnesotans, you know, the big rule of the Midwest is when you're excited about something or think something really holds promise, to be quiet and not let anybody know. So we accept those accolades, and we want people to know what we're doing in St. Paul. We want people to hear the story about St. Paul. So I tell that story. We tell these stories every chance we get. And every time I want you to know that I tell them I'm accepting those accolades, that I'm accepting that applause, that I'm accepting those honors and the recognition for St. Paul, not really on my own behalf, but on your behalf, on the partners, the private sector partners, the nonprofit partners, the public sector, the public employees, the residents, and certainly the building owners. You know, it's a particular pleasure for me when I'm speaking somewhere and they go, how do you get the private sector to get involved at this? That I can point to this program and say, look, we literally have hundreds of private sector leaders who are at the table, who are in the trenches with us, who are helping us turn this curve. That means a lot to me. And we literally would not be able to do the work that we do. We would not be able to have the impact, the strong transformational impact that we're having without your partnership. So from the bottom of my heart, thank you for your work.
Thank you, Mayor. And we did get through the recognition part of the event before you joined us. So we really appreciate you being able to do so. I think we did actually fill out the bingo card, but just barely. Amila was clearly enjoying the event. Molly?
Yes, she gets all worked up about climate. So that's my daughter congratulating you all as well. And congratulations to all of you who've been honored and recognized today.
And I just, before we wrap here, I just wanted to big shout out to Molly and Parker in particular for organizing this event. In some ways, organizing a virtual event is easier than an in-person event, and in other ways, it's harder. So thank you. Great job on the video, Parker. Nice job with putting the program together. I hope you all appreciated spending a little bit of time with us. And Molly, hand it back